Welcome back to Endless Tangents. This is episode 10. I'm your host, Zamb1esaurus, with my co-host, Twiggles. Twiggles, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I'll be honest. For those around that have allergies, a big shout out to those. Allergies are terrible. They are tough to live with. My body doesn't feel great. I always feel like I'm kind of sick, but also not really. There's all sorts of allergies going on around there, and hope everyone is managing.
Yep, I too suffer from, I think it's tree pollen and dust, I guess. The beginning of the spring is the worst. It just feels like you just can never breathe and you're just in this haze until it's over. It's a terrible feeling.
And you take it for granted that there could be dust everywhere. That's the hardest part.
God,
and
yeah.
You got to make sure you clean your house. We have purifiers running. But just going outside, like you said, could be any mix of trees, flowers, and who knows what you're allergic to. I know some people are very specific. They moved to a new area, didn't even realize they might be allergic to some kind of walnut trees or, different types of flowers. And all of a sudden you don't realize it's right around the block and you're breathing it in and you just feel terrible. So
yeah, it can be a giant pain in the butt for some folks, for sure.
Absolutely. But how are you, man? How are you doing with your goals? We're getting to that time.
It's that time of the month. We're going to talk about our goals that we set at the beginning of the year. My goal is swimming. So right before our podcast recording, I actually do a swim. I go to a swim lesson or like a practice, and I'm getting there. It feels like I'm finally at the point where it's like I can go from one end of the pool to the other. I actually have my breathing down, and it's more about being fluid and comfortable in the water, and then just, building muscle memory and just starting to just do laps after laps. Before it was like kind of like a survival lap every time. So I could do laps, but it was not pretty, and it just looked like I was trying to survive. So now it feels more fluid, and it's actually like I'm swimming.
That's amazing. Yeah. It is definitely a great skill to have. But like you said, a lot of it just comes down to muscle memory and getting time in the water. So
for sure,
hopefully over time, you'll just get more and more comfortable with it. So amazing job.
Yeah. How about your goals?
My goals are going okay. So my goals, to remind folks, is really around just sleep and stress snacking. I think I have generally been doing better with my sleep. I do still have some periodic events and things on a regular basis, either weekly or bi-weekly, where I go to hang out with people, try and spend time with friends, which often disrupts the sleep cycle. And the reality is I often pay the price over the weekend. So the reality is it worth it? For now, I enjoy hanging out with my friends. I enjoy spending time, and it's a sacrifice I'm making. But I do realize it also often takes away the energy and the just ability to kind of be present during the weekend, which is often the times that I spend with my family. So I do need to be careful with that. I do try my best. Otherwise, I end up napping. I get headaches. I'm tired throughout the weekend. You're essentially mini jet lagging myself every week. So it's a work in progress. But other than that, I have generally been getting over 7 hours of sleep. I have been trying to get to bed earlier, spending time with my wife when I can. And my other one, which is stress snacking, I do feel like sort of the key for me is just getting rid of the snacks. But the reality is every time we go shopping, those snacks are calling my name. So we try to minimize it.
Yeah.
And we realize just having it in the house is, especially on the, let's say, the living room table, it makes it real tough. It makes it real easy, I would say.
Really easy to eat. Yep.
Just easy, just a little bit. It's just a little bit. I feel like I've been doing better, but it is still something that I need to continue working on.
Yeah. Not buying the snacks is the tough part, but the only thing that we noticed was eat a full meal before you go grocery shopping.
Oh, 100%. Right? That is definitely the secret. Do not go when you're hungry for anything, because then you just feel real tempted.
Yeah. But that's good. It's good that you've made progress on your goals. And then speaking of like what we're going to talk about in the podcast with it, which is related to a bit of like neurodivergence and ADHD, but it's really about retirement planning. And the reason why I'd say it's a little related, obviously, because there's a financial aspect to when you go shopping and you're buying all kinds of stuff. People who have ADHD or you're neurodivergent, they may have trouble with some of these things. And
some of these things are not quite tangible right now.
Oh.
Even just like working out, it is real tough. A lot of times you need that dopamine hit of that immediate response that you made a difference. But for something like, retirement planning and saving up money, that often could take years, many, many years. And
exactly,
how do you predict the future? That's always a big worry that I have. But you try to use, sort of the law of these averages, and you hope for the best. You can predict something that could just be catastrophic, but you make the best decisions that you can, and you try and average things out.
Yeah, and just before we begin talking about a lot of these topics, we aren't financial experts, and we aren't trying to give any explicit advice. We're just sharing our experiences and the things we've researched to help us on our journey. So, getting into it, one of the most important things when we talk about retirement planning is not actually about the finance part, right? It's really about the fact that retirement planning is a very long process, right? You're trying to plan out for your next 50 years, right? So
Mm.
let's say you're 20 or 30 years old.
Right. And for those
That
that are
is
listening, exactly, you might be you might be farther down the journey, or you might be earlier in the journey. But
right.
regardless, the hope is that we're all hopefully going to retire at some point, someday. So it's really important to, if you haven't started, to start thinking about it. What do you have of your future? Where do you want it to go? How do you want to shape it?
Before we get there, it's really, the problem is for folks that are neurodivergent is, this is a linear path, right? This is a linear logical path. And that is not something that really gels well with neurodivergence, right?
Mm.
So when we talk about ADHD, when you have executive dysfunction, you have trouble planning. Retirement planning is something that takes decades, and you have trouble at it. So you have to come up with strategies and things that will help you, in the long run. That will help you plan your retirements, how to save money, and all these kind of things. So it's something that is not something that we talk about very often when it comes to retirement planning. I think people generally keep that to themselves, but someone who is struggling with ADHD or other kinds of conditions, that's not even on the forefront of their mind, right? They're just trying to get by, or trying to think about, like, what am I going to do in the next few hours, or even tomorrow? Forget next week, next month, next year, or next decade. And so when you look at moving from retirement as a traditional thing that everyone gets to do, as a neurodivergent person may end up retiring with nothing or very little because they just couldn't figure it out. And it's not their ability that they couldn't do it, far from it. It's just the tools that are not really designed and marketed towards them. The first thing they talk about is like budgeting and debt. And when you don't have a budget, how do you even know how much money you're making, how much money you have, how much you can put into retirement?
It's true. And I think one thing to kind of support what you were saying is that typically there are some people that almost haven't, we talked about allergic reactions. It's almost like an allergy to spreadsheets. And spreadsheets are not the only way that you can use to build a budget. Especially in this day and age, there's more and more tools, either platforms or applications and subscriptions that you could buy. Subscriptions is a whole nother topic of, leading to snowballing spending. But these types of platforms have all been kind of built for someone in mind. There are the super technical folks that want to look at every single penny. But what's really interesting I listen to a lot of financial podcasts, and they always talk about, how are those spreadsheets serving you? A lot of times, we talk about the psychology of money and how essentially we were raised as kids. Now, you start to reflect, how many of these things are just habits that you inherited from your parents in a completely different time and generation and just a different scenario? And
Yeah.
I know when I grew up, I saved every single receipt. Why? Because my mom told me to. When I go and log everything, I make sure that every single, payment cleared. I knew exactly where all my money was going. Now, did I actually do anything with that? Not really. So why was I going through these steps? Almost just to give me this facade of feeling like I have control.
Yeah.
And some of those little things really kind of jumped out at me for many years I did this. And at some point, when I met my wife, she would go, she's like, what are you doing? You're spending all this time collecting all this almost trash at this point. Sure, if you want to keep some and double check, if you're going on vacations, you're worried that maybe somewhere is going to double charge you or something, which has happened. But that is like one in hundreds of transactions. And with that said, it is really important, like you said, to be able to find a strategy that helps you at least understand the basics of finances and figuring out what your situation is. Starting with just, how much money do you make?
How much
Right?
money do you make? What's your monthly take home? because some people, they might know how much their salary is, but they don't actually know how much money they make on a month. Are you getting paid, every twice a week, or
Yeah.
twice a month, once a month? I know with some professions like teaching,
Yeah.
they
You
can
get
get paid
those.
for 10 months and then they have 2 months of no payments,
Then you really have to plan.
right?
Exactly. Because now you're
So
trying to live off of that money, where if you were just going off your checking account, that money lasted that 1 month. You still got a few more months to go. Could be
exactly.
tough.
And one of the things personally that helped me a lot was the envelope method. And that is something that's built into an app called You Need a Budget. You need a budget.com, or YNAB for short. And so the idea behind it is, you have envelopes, and each envelope represents a category of funding that you want to buy, you want to spend on, like, groceries, your mortgage or rent, student loans, whatever. And you're supposed to put your money in those envelopes at the beginning of the month. And then as you need to make those payments, you take out that money and make your payment. So you're giving jobs to money that you have at the beginning of the month. And that kind of forces you to change your framework on how you think, because it's like, oh, I only have this much money. How do I get ahead? How do I make all of my payments, save money for whatever, fun stuff, or, whatever you want to save, your goals, and be able to fund the next month, versus how a lot of the country lives today is paycheck to paycheck, where it's like, I don't have any money. I'm just going to say that my rent is due on the last day of the month. When I get my paycheck in the middle of the month, that'll be for my rent, right? And it changes the philosophy on how you think about your money, what you're actually spending your money on, right? Because when you're sitting there, it's really easy to, for example, order DoorDash for $50. But when you have to sit there and take the money out of the envelope, you're like, man,
That was allocated for something else.
exactly, that's a lot of money. Or your dining out envelope is now empty, and you're having to borrow money from another envelope. And that's when it really starts to hit you that, oh my God, like, what am I doing? So a lot of retirement planning, a lot of budgeting and debt repayment, there's a huge mental aspect to it.
Yeah. I think one of the topics that I think we've talked about in the past, but I think it warrants in this kind of topic again, is thinking about, can you afford something? Like you said, oftentimes, oh, we totally deserve it. We worked so hard. We have some money in the account. Why don't we spend it? Splurge a little bit. How do I know if I could justify spending, getting that Starbucks, going out to dinner to treat ourselves? A special occasion happened, but then you start to scale it. Where is the line? Where do you draw the line? What about potentially buying a car, buying a house, having a big marriage, right? And a wedding, all of these things. How do you know what that number is? And did you factor in the hidden costs? Most of these things, even a vacation, oftentimes you're going to plan out a vacation. Oh, we'll totally keep that on budget. A few $1,000s, it won't be that bad. And then all of a sudden it balloons out of control because something you can't control. Maybe there's hotel fees. Suddenly there's bad weather and you get stuck somewhere for an extra time, and suddenly everything gets thrown out of whack. So it's really important to think about, being prepared and having that money allocation to understand, how is that money serving you?
And to your point, a lot of the things that you just mentioned, people, for example, like with ADHD, you have an impulse spending control problem, most likely. And I know I do.
It's real easy to justify for yourself. We talked about our impulse buys.
We're always,
exactly.
the ADHD hobby tax. It's really easy to start spending money, but also to remember, you can have an envelope or a category for fun stuff.
Absolutely.
And you can have money to spend and do fun things. You just need to make sure that you allocate it correctly at the beginning. And we're spending a little time on budgeting and debt repayment because truly you can't retirement plan without really understanding how much money you make, how much debt you have, and how much, whether it's good debt, like a mortgage, or like bad debt, like a credit card. You need to set aside money to pay those things off over time, or as soon as possible if it's something like credit card debt or student loans. And then once you're in a good position to get rid of those things, you can start to allocate money to retirement planning, because your percentage rate on a credit card debt is like 10, 15, 20, 25%. your stock market returns that you might put into your, index funds, even today when they're doing really well, they're like 16%, right? So your credit card is earning more interest than your retirement planning would. So that's why we were spending a little more time on, budgeting to control your money and don't spend a lot so you don't go into debt. And if you have debt, control your spending so that you can allocate money to pay it off.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things that I've kind of taken to heart is everyone's situation is different. We do kind of recommend, finding and understanding the basics of financial literacy. It can be very difficult. There's a lot of levers. There's a lot of things that can impact you, and everybody's situation is a little bit different. So we always encourage, try and find a community, find some other people that might be like-minded that could teach you the ropes. Tons of books, obviously, lots of video podcasts, and other channels on YouTube. But with that said, you also need to be a little bit wary, right? Sometimes there could be traps. There could be, people out there trying to sort of get your money. But it's important to understand how some of these things work. Like you said, there's these hidden costs. We don't want to get into it, but some of the common things that people don't think about is, oh, this timeshare is great. And then you start to understand, wow, this is really just, a hook, and you get stuck with it. You also have different types of life insurance. You might have, whole life insurance, which seems great, but then when you actually do out the math, these people are salespeople. They're finding ways to benefit them. And you talk about even retirement planners. This is something where often if they're charging you 1%, assets under management, that seems great until you realize, like you said, if you're semi-conservative, you might only be making 4 to 10% in the stock market. And again, could go up, could go down, but 1% of that seems so trivial, right? But when you start to do out the math and actually understand the impact of it, it builds up. And just the concept of compounding interest in things can work both ways, especially with debt, that many people don't realize. Well, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's something like if you have your money in the stock markets, and I forget what the percentage is, but you hope to have it double in either 7 to 10 years. But if you have your debt for that long, it's also doubling.
Yes.
If not faster, because the credit card interest rates are much, much higher.
Yeah.
So, yeah, food for thought. And if you haven't really thought about it or really dug into it, take a little bit of time. You could literally be saving yourself thousands of dollars if you're able to, throw some money at it and really understand. It's real easy to just have things lying around. Like you said, that that tax on yourself of having things that you bought that you totally wanted to use. But if it's sitting there and it's not serving you, maybe be better off trying to pay some of that debt back. Otherwise, you're paying almost doubly over time.
Yeah. And to your point, like knowing where your money is going is so important, because it's really easy to automate subscriptions and then not realize, oh my goodness, I'm spending like $200 a month on Netflix and
It's true.
Disney Plus and whatever other subscriptions. There's so many different things. Everyone is subscription based. They're all trying to get your money. A really good thing to do is to create friction for yourself, and that's to remove your credit cards from your browser, so that the impetus is not to click, okay, I'll just subscribe for the free trial, and then you get charged 30 days later and you don't really bother to try to cancel it.
There's a reason why these companies have these subscribe and saves. And try and encourage you to, even like gym memberships. Oh, whoops, I totally forgot. And even especially, fortunately, I don't think we've been that bad at it, but wow, that subscription sounds great as you sign up for it a second time or a third time, and you don't even realize. I mean, I've definitely bought the same shirt multiple times. Fortunately, that doesn't come with a subscription fee, but that's also why I think both of us are very skeptical about subscriptions. We really make sure. I know I have Todoist reminders, telling myself when these things and in YNAB, when the general next hit will be.
Yeah.
But also, as you said, a lot of these companies with the cost of AI and just managing people, a lot of these costs are just going up. And
every couple of
pretty
weeks
rapidly.
I get an email.
Yeah.
Your subscription's going up. And it's like, it'll never stop.
It won't stop.
So it's you yourself need to analyze whether you need the subscription or not, whether it's worth it or not. Keep it if you need it. Don't keep it if you don't need it, right?
Yeah.
That money saved can be used for other more important things, especially in this day and age where everything is just getting more expensive.
Absolutely.
One of the other things we wanted to talk about is planning for surprise bills. This is something that I learned over time as I was using YNAB to budget. And it was like, things like unexpected expenses that you really don't think about, like car registration or
Hmm.
property,
Or any medical
fees,
emergencies.
medical
You never
emergencies.
plan for that, but just in case.
One of the concepts with YNAB that if you look it up, you may find out is called being YNAB poor. And the idea is like, if I get $3,000 a month after taxes and everything, and all of my expenses cost 2,000, most people would think, oh, I have $1,000 a month to play around with. But really, like, you should be setting aside money for house repairs, car repairs, medical expenses, unexpected things, that kind of stuff that you don't really think about on a day-to-day basis, but are things that will come up on a monthly basis or a year-to-year basis, right? And understanding over time, when I had to pay a lot of these bills, I was like, oh, wow, I should make an envelope and categorize and put money in it over time because I know in a couple of years I'm going to have to do this. And you start to realize, oh my goodness, I have so many hidden fees that really don't come up. If you have a credit card that has an annual fee, your home insurance, your auto insurance, all these premiums and stuff like that. So that's something really important to think about as you begin to square away your monthly outlook, your budgeting, and your debt repayment.
Yeah. And a personal anecdote, I think both of us kind of were guilty of this, is you go a little bit crazy sometimes building out these budgets. And it was almost like a race to see who could allocate and write out and build more subcategories. And it got out of control. Right. And this is,
Yes.
again, a personal anecdote. We both, I think, did it. And we started drilling it down saying, hey, I need a haircut budget. I'm going to spend this much on this frequency. I need to have a bakery budget. My eating out was quite diverse. It was lunch. I had dinner. It was dinner with friends. It was maybe on weekdays. I would get lunches from work, but then also breakfast. And I had all these different things that I felt, again, it gave me a sense of control. But what was it actually doing? Was it really helping me allocating all this?
Oh.
Not really. So what we learned over time was, again, how is that tracking really serving you? Now, I'm still not great with it, to be honest. And I've kind of learned from you, and we started going over it, saying, hey, I realized with the cost of groceries, the cost of growing, everything is getting more expensive. Now, am I adjusting my spending accordingly? Now, am I a true YNABber? I definitely log everything. I do put things in the right buckets and categories, but do I react to it? And the answer is not really, which means that I'm kind of missing out on the purpose of it. But as you go through, I'm very fortunate that I do have, some wiggle room and some budget. We've already allocated, savings and investments and things. But with that said, as all of the grocery budgets go up, we have been spending more money. So what does that mean to sort of the money that we can spend on other things? Technically, it would be going down.
Yeah.
So how are we tracking this and how are we reacting? And that kind of leads itself to, having some general money meetings or just some planning and understanding, and oftentimes kind of jumping ahead. But, being in a relationship can be difficult. We've talked about in the past, different psychologies of money. You interpret the world, especially the world of money, could be completely differently.
Big time. It's not something that people talk about often because it sounds crass, I guess, to, when you're dating, you want to meet someone because they have a great personality or, those kind of attributes, not
hey, how much debt do you have?
Right? How much
hey,
debt?
How savvy are you?
There's the topic of like, you want to marry someone rich, but no one talks about like, do you want to marry someone who's in debt, right? Obviously you wouldn't, but it's not something that you think about, right? On paper, if we said like, would you want to marry a person A who's got $500,000 worth of debt or person B who's got $500,000 in the bank? Everyone's going to say person B. But the reality is that you need debt to do things, right? You need debt to buy a house. You need student loan debt to go to school. You need all kinds of debt if you have a business, right? But how you manage those things can be good or can be really bad. And when you're dating someone, you don't really know these things at the beginning, or if you get married, that's when you start to like find out all these kind of things. And it's really important to have that conversation.
Even after getting married. It's not even guaranteed.
Difficult. It's such a difficult topic to talk about even right now, me personally, because it's like, I don't want to sound like it's all about money. I mean, obviously the podcast we're talking about today, the episode is about money. So yeah, but it's a struggle. The other person can really violently react, or not violent, but like aggressively take offense to what you're going to talk about with them.
Yep.
But I think that's an important conversation to have, because you're going to spend the rest of your life together. Do you want to be in debt, or do you want to
And
retire?
like you said, it can be incredibly emotional, right? And
Yes.
oftentimes it's out of their control. They may just viscerally react, like you said. It's oftentimes, again, I listen to a lot of these podcasts, and they interview these couples, and they talk about, hey, how did you grow up? You were given these money lessons growing up. You don't realize it. You take it for granted that, hey, I was raised with a scarcity mindset. We were afraid to spend money. We didn't know when we were going to have money. Or I grew up in debt. So I value whatever dollar comes, but I also realize that money could disappear in the blink of an eye. So trying to merge these two styles of money that may be completely different can be extremely difficult. And like you said, we go back to, the reason why we're picking these topics is because they're very near and dear to our hearts. These are things that we deal with on a daily basis. And the way to do it, like you said, is to communicate, is to understand and align. And it is very possible that your significant other may just have a complete fear of it, complete paralysis of, they see it and their mind just shuts down because they just don't know. They're in kind of shock that they just can't handle it. Or they may even defer. They just say, hey, well, you seem to know what you're doing. I'm in a place of almost weakness. What could I offer? But as you said, the most important thing is working together. Oftentimes, especially if you were in a partnership at work and you had someone was stronger or was weaker, you wouldn't just leave the weak behind. You wouldn't just, kind of lead everything yourself. You would hope that you would work together to level you both up so that you can, work together. And that's the importance of a marriage and a relationship. And especially when you start bringing in kids, you know that the kids are listening. They're observing. Just as you did unconsciously from your parents, your kids are learning also. So trying to build a good habit and those routines really comes down to self-awareness.
Yes.
How do you change yourself to set a good role model? And do you even know what you're doing? I'll be honest. I think the concept of this podcast is learning and growing, right? On a regular basis, there are things where like, wow, I've been living my whole life this way. How did I get here? Why would I make these decisions?
Yeah. And that kind of goes into another topic that we'll talk about, which is what is your goal with retirement, right? So, we talked about budgeting, we talked about, debt repayment and budgeting, talked about aligning with your spouse or your significant other. But even if you're aligned on like having a budget and debt, what is your goal? What do you want to do when you retire? Retirement is not, I'm done working. It's not an end. It's a new beginning for the rest of your life. Right. And so for folks with neurodivergence, especially like, ADHD, you have trouble thinking that long term. It's really important to automate a lot of these things so that you don't forget. And, as you said earlier, you have like different reminders with Todoist or like calendars, but there's also what you can do in terms of retirement. Like if you have the funds available, just have it automatically invest. If you have options through your work, like 401k, those kind of things, look into, in having them automatically take money out of your paycheck and putting it into your retirement fund and investing it, because it makes it so much easier when you don't think about it.
Yeah, I believe the concept that goes along with it, I don't remember who said this, but the importance of it is if you know you're going to spend your money, you know it's going to disappear. How do you try to allocate these things ahead of time? And the most important thing is actually to pay yourself first. Even in some cases, potentially going into debt, obviously that's not great. But if you don't prioritize these things, when will you? Time flies by fast. And the biggest way of compounding your money is time. And the earlier you start, I know this is something that I was very fortunate when I was, early on in my career, I was still living at home, so I didn't have to pay rent. And you talk about what is your plan? What is your goal? Again, completely honest. When I grew up, I came from parents that had a scarcity mindset. They were immigrants and they went through a lot and they tried to build us a new life. And it was important to them to save as much as they could because you never know what will happen the next day. And as I started my, adult life, I did the same thing. And honestly, it wasn't until semi-recently you asked, what is your goal? I had no idea. My goal was to every decision that came up, I almost felt like the bad guy. We would go over and say, hey, well, can we go on vacation? I don't know. How do we know if we could afford it? Couldn't we be saving more? And I
Mm-hmm.
suddenly became that guy that was always no, no, no. How did that make my significant other feel? How did that prioritize our family's life, the direction we wanted to go in? You never know what could happen. So, I've seen a lot of times where these couples prioritize saving. And just like we've talked about muscle memory and things, if you don't exercise that muscle of spending and you save your whole life for 10, 15, 20 years, it might suddenly become real difficult to spend money. And it
Yep.
seems like such an odd concept. But, as we're dealing with our parents and working with them as they're getting older, one reality we understand is that they're probably not going to change. However they've lived their whole life, even if it's for their own good, it doesn't matter.
It's so interesting because you grew up in a scarcity mindset and I grew up in let's have fun.
Yeah.
It does, I talk to my family often and I talk to them sometimes about retirement and they're like, what's that? They have no concept of retirement and they spend money like they are not going to live till, tomorrow, and they plan to continue working until they drop dead.
Hmm.
And whether they're saving money, I don't know, but it's interesting how different people can be when it comes to money. Whether you're not spending it or you are spending it. That's a question that you as a listener will have to answer. Write it down, work with your significant other to figure out what you guys are trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different definitions of that. There's a concept of FIRE, which is financially independent, retire early. There's a concept called creating your rich life, which I think Twiggles is one of your favorite
from Ramit Sethi.
podcasters.
Exactly. And I think what's really interesting and compelling, why I really gravitated towards that is just like, I can't remember the term and you'll probably correct me. Being able to achieve a goal, like working out, trying to create imagery to really incentivize you to make it something very real.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trying to work out, I just want to lose that pound. But what does that pound mean? I want to gain a little bit of muscle. What does it mean? I want to save $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million. If you're fortunate to get to those points, where does it stop?
Exactly.
When is enough? Saving those amounts of money to many people could almost sound impossible. But very similar with working out and these things, it is gradual. It takes effort every single day. And I'll be honest, I know I don't work out every day as much as I should. But the key is that every little bit counts. And you need to be able to set your mind to your mindset of knowing this is the direction I want to go in. But again, what I like about Ramit's Rich Life process is really paint a picture. What exactly is it? Are you going to go buy that fancy dress you wanted? You're going to go on this amazing vacation, that once in a lifetime vacation. Maybe it's even, this is what really kicked it in for me. When he started interviewing on his Netflix show, he asked a couple, and this is something that I felt like it never crossed my mind. The couple said, I want to retire my parents. That was such a compelling thing that I've never heard anybody say before. But that was something that they wanted to do, and they could stick to it because they knew the sacrifices their parents made to help set up their life, and they were still working. To be able to say, there's a lot of content creators and streamers and people say, I bought my mom a house, bought my parents a car, right? That would be great to be able to do. But if you don't set your mind to it and really focus on achieving these things, time can fly by. And maybe it's not your parents, maybe it's yourself, but building this rich life and being as detailed as possible to be able to dream. And maybe you dream too big, but it's still a dream. And then you start to create smaller dreams, but of actual tangible things. It's something that he talks about is, be hyper specific. What vacation? Where? What are you going to order? What are you going to wear? You're going to go to the beach? Great. You want to get a bathing suit. You want to work out. You want to look good. You want to feel good. What exactly are you going to eat at that restaurant? And suddenly it feels so much more real to you. Now, is it still difficult? Absolutely. But it's a lot easier than, I just want to hit $10,000.
And, to add to your point, a lot of people, especially, older adults, millennials, Gen X, they probably can hear this and they probably feel shame, like I'm not doing this. And like you should not feel shame about having a late start. You know, the phrase is like the best time to invest is when you're 18. The second best time is now.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. You can
It's about making
essentially
those
forgive
incremental
yourself.
gains.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Forgive yourself and start today and move forward today, because it does take time. But if you can figure out your budget and pay off your debts and have money to start investing, that money grows and it gets bigger by itself. Go on Google and ask it to show you how a retirement calculator works. See what it would say if you put $50 a month for 20 years as it invests itself. You'll be surprised on how much it grows. There's an old saying in, I think it's like India, or it was like one of the Persian countries, where there was a king who made a bet with someone, all the people in his town, about I think it was like chess, right? And it was something about you put 1 grain of rice on the first square, and then one of the people who took the bet, they kept doubling the amount of rice on each square.
Quickly, yeah.
And by the time he got to like 32, I think, there was no more rice in the world that could theoretically fit on that chessboard or something like that. I forget. I totally butchered it. But,
Yeah.
you know, like the power of compounding is crazy. Really, the hardest part is the earning your first 100,000 in your retirement. The second 100,000 takes half the amount of time. And the third 100,000 takes even less. And before you know it, you're at $1 million. Now, obviously, that's a lot of money. And if you're not able to contribute enough to get to that point, that's a question for you. Job instability. Do you change jobs? Do you get a better job, more higher paying job? Do you go back to school? These are all questions that you need to answer for yourself and figure out what your life is going to look like.
It's an important factor, like you said. That is something where you could also budget and save your money as much as you can, but there is ultimately a potential limit. There might be a situation where either you're just spending too much, your fixed costs are too high, or the amount of money you may need to try and find a second or third job. It's very often, especially those types of labor jobs, where if you're generally working hourly, you just work another gig, try a little bit harder. Especially it can be certain mentalities of immigrants and things. They say, hey, I'm just going to work harder. And especially if you inherit that from your parents. But it might be that you need to try and branch out and find another skill set or something that could make more money. Now, that is equally as difficult. So it's hard to figure out, especially I think about this all the time about my kids. Where is life going to take us? I don't know. What is the secret to making good money? And I think the most important thing that I try and teach my kids is learning to critically think and problem solve, and just be comfortable with dealing with the unknown and not fear it, and figure out how to adapt and find patterns and make the best of it. Because I think that's really the skill set that will set you apart. Because none of us really know what's going to happen. To be honest, I think both of us are candidly sometimes in fear of our industries. What could happen? Do we have enough? And you talk about the rich life. One of those things that I know personally I've lived with was, do I have enough? Especially as we see our parents getting older, we realize how incredibly expensive it can be. But with that said, if you live in this constant state of fear where you never, will you ever know? Maybe not. And if you continue to save, suddenly you're going to end up 50, 60 years old, retiring. You have all this money, which is great, but now your physical body can't keep up anymore. You can't take that trip anymore. You suddenly have these limitations. You have back pains, leg pains, and you just don't have the energy anymore. And it's I don't want to say it's sad. I think everyone makes their choices, and that might be the direction and the path that you want to go in. But what I think we encourage is take stock in understanding the situation you're in, and is that the path you really want? Because like you said, I think for me, for many years, I was blindly saving. And again, we'd try and go on vacation and say, we should just save money. It seems so expensive. It's funny, I was just listening to an episode where they talked about a couple saying, I just couldn't buy these leggings. I couldn't buy these pants. I could only buy it if it was on sale. And that's my mentality.
Yeah.
I know, like you said, we've had this conversation many times, like, well, it's on sale. I don't need that. I'll just get the one that's full price. It's almost a complete paradigm shift. But I can't help it. I look for those sales and I feel like I'm getting ripped off. But you also got to think about, where is that money going and is it worth it?
Yeah. And a lot of what we're talking about, even though we're talking about retirement planning, so much of it is just a mental aspect to finance, to your life, to how you run things. Because when you save for retirement, um, there's so many, you're going to be inundated with so much information, like what type of retirement plan, what,
The tax
vesting funds and all that kind
implications.
of stuff. It can be overwhelming, and we're kind of on purpose not really talking about that kind of stuff because that depends on your situation. It depends on the job you work, so many different factors where you live. You live in another country. The best thing to do in that scenario is to, sit down, figure it out, look for an advisor if you don't have a good understanding of finances. If you do, go for it, read books, learn, educate and empower yourself. And the reason we talk about the mental aspect more is because with neurodivergence, a lot of these things, they just don't come to the front of the mind, and you're really stuck in the 9 to 5 survival and your day to day versus, thinking about these things. So it's important to sit down, um, visualize what your retirement what do you want it to look like, how you want it to look like with your spouse, with your kids. And if you're unfortunate situation where you have parents like we both do who have chronic illness, like sometimes those are things that are genetic and you actually need to take that into
Start planning.
account. You
Yeah.
have to start planning for disability. And it's a really morbid thing to think about, but it's a very real thing, especially if you have kids.
Yeah.
Do you want to leave your kids in a position where they're struggling to help you? So there's a lot of, so retirement in itself is not just money. There's a lot of different things that go into it that you want to talk about, with your spouse, with your kids as they get older, teach them good habits. But it's really about the mental aspect, truly.
Yeah. And I think your point, getting started, I think it's really easy to feel, again, fear and defeated of just getting started. I know we've read some books on goal setting. How do you make sure you actually accomplish those goals? And you often self-sabotage. It's very easy for your brain to win and give in and just say, hey, that's too big of a, too daunting of a task. That amount of debt, it's never going to go away. What's the point? Until one day you realize it's actually exponentially growing also.
Yes.
So if you don't deal with this, it's also not great. Now,
Yeah.
are there avenues and things that you could do to try and, alleviate it? Yes, but even those are completely detrimental to just your way of life for the future. So it is extremely difficult. There are a lot of situations, and I think the big thing that people may take for granted, and hopefully you realize it and apply it to yourself, is what is my situation? Is this still the situation that I really want to be in? And is this going to be my way of life for the future? And is there something I can do? And again, start small. Find just a little bit, learn a little bit, find out what other people are doing. That's, I think we have very fortunate friends and within our groups where we try to be open.
Yeah.
We try and share, maybe not exactly every detail of how much money we have, but just the concept of learning how stocks work. I know I have some friends where I've even asked them, I said, hey, why are you taking time to, teach me about these things? And the answer was, well, I hope we could all retire together at some point.
Yeah.
If I save all this money and you don't, we can't go on vacation together. We can't spend time together. We can't have this rich life together. And that was very compelling to me. And I try and pay it forward also.
Yeah. Small, consistent actions matter. Being able to, even if you're struggling with a lot of things, making one small change is far better than trying to drastically change everything around, because
one step at a time,
consistent, and it's something that you can make into a habit and then build upon, right? A lot of people fail on their New Year's resolutions because they try to drastically change everything.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
That's I know we've definitely read a lot about even the concept of saving your first 100,000, and one of the books that I listened to talked about that, and they said, why does that suddenly feel so difficult, and why does that almost portray your road to success? The reason why is because in order to get there, you have to build those little habits. You have to understand how the interest is working, how you're making sure you're living within your means, and these other concepts, which then suddenly build a foundation for the future. As you make more money, you're already used to saving some of this. You're already used to allocating. But now, can you get to a point where you make a lot of money? That's also possible. There are a lot of, we talk about athletes, you talk about doctors who are not great with money.
No.
They never
Lifestyle
really
creep.
learn. They never really understand. They just see a whole fat check in their bank account. Well, I guess I got to spend it. Where that could be life-changing money if they were to invest it and then try, and there's also peer pressure, keeping up with the Joneses. I know we've talked about this. It's real easy to feel like you belong. It becomes your identity. That's why lifestyle creep and increasing your fixed costs can feel like cutting your arm off. How could I possibly not go to private school or not, buy this brand of milk or buy this type of car or add on these furnishings, in my house? Is it really that important? To some people, it may be. But then suddenly you're living beyond what you can afford and it just snowballs. So keeping your fixed costs is really important, and at least understanding it. A lot of people might not realize it, and they just, again, look at their bank account. But if they're not already investing and paying themselves forward, it's real easy to just, not set yourself up for the future.
Yeah, it's, we talked about automating finances, and I actually ran it through the calculator. If you were to invest $50 a month, it would take you about 30 years to get to $100,000, which sounds terrible. But do you know how long it would take to go from 100 to 200,000 if you stopped investing that $50 a month? 7 years. And then how long would it take to go further? It would be about 3 to 4 years, and even less. And that's assuming you stopped contributing. If you continue the $50 a month, I mean, you don't need it. It could. I think takes 27 to 45 years. If you contribute, you can get to $1 million. So don't discount the fact that you haven't been doing stuff. Start small, be consistent, and automate as much as you can, whether it's through your jobs, through your job 401k, that kind of stuff. Or if you have leftover cash at the end of the month, throw it into an index fund or something, that kind of stuff. Look it up, read, learn. There's so many different resources. One good one that I like to use is Reddit, which is our personal finance subreddit. And
Yep.
I especially like it because of the knowledge by society. Like when you have a lot of people talking about it, there tends to be a good point versus like a single individual might make a bad point. Society as a whole generally will agree on a consensus that's good. So read about as much as you can, because you can do it, and a lot of it is really just mental and figuring out where all the things are going. Once you connect the dots, it becomes a lot easier to understand.
Yeah, and I'm sure one of these episodes we will get into, we've talked about our parents, but also just parenting as a whole. And I think both of us are trying to plan for our kids. We don't know what the future is going to be like. The job market, just, careers, it's going to be difficult. But to your point, time is critical. So I think both of us are trying to invest, even if little bits. You talked about, investing that little bit of money towards them. We, kind of squirrel it away. We allow it to grow over time and hope it grows into something big, so they can inherit, at a minimum, inherit something. But this is also after focusing on ourselves, because obviously we're farther down into our life. We also don't have as much time potentially. So you have to balance it out and figure out where you want to put your money. And not just also, I've heard that as a thing too. As you become a parent, it could sometimes be, if you haven't built those habits to be able to say that keyword no.
Yeah.
It's real easy. And again, we'll get into a parenting episode at some point where you spend all your money on the kids.
Yep.
And suddenly all your money's gone. Oh, well, how do you say no to that toy? They're going to cry
toy,
about it.
That treat, that candy, that whatever the other kids have that they want. It's a never-ending cycle.
Never ending.
But yeah, I mean, we talked about a lot of different things. What were some of the things that really hit home for you, Twiggles?
I think the big thing, it's always been really understanding what my mindset is. I think very compelling to myself in the past few years. It's been a very sort of interesting road to self-discovery and self-awareness. That is something that I think, after some reflection, money and finances was probably the largest potential source of friction with my wife. Not intentional. I just didn't appreciate the psychology of money. And how you work with someone. It's like taking two people of different political views, different religions,
Hmm.
how your upbringing, and allowing me to express my emotions correctly and learning to communicate, again, all the topics that we've talked about, has made it a lot easier to work with, my wife, and
Yeah.
understanding what sort of the strengths and weaknesses. Because again, I love budgets. I love spreadsheets. I bust it out, and the first response is, yeah, I'm tired. I have no interest in learning any of this. But when I start to portray it, and this is something I learned, from some of the planning with the Rich Life and Ramit, is start it with some of the photos. Start it with visualizing the vacations you've gone on and positive mindset. And suddenly it was a little bit easier. Hey, do we want to do this again? Yeah, we do. That'd be great. Okay, then maybe that's a priority.
Yeah.
Did we like this thing? Nope. No, we did not. Great. We should cut back on that because it's really not that critical. It's not something that we want to focus time and attention on.
For the folks who are listening, if you don't know, Twiggles comes on hard with spreadsheets. This guy has a spreadsheet for his
For
spreadsheets
everything.
to manage them.
It's true.
For me, my biggest takeaway is really just having a goal. Like the retirement goal is so important. And especially with having ADHD, if I don't have a goal, I feel like I start to become comfortable in my position, start to kind of, I guess you could almost just say like sink into the sofa. You don't want to get out of it. You're too comfortable. You don't want to make changes when instead, if you have a goal in place, then you're going to try to do the things you need to do to get to that goal, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable. And generally speaking, the more uncomfortable you are in your growth, the better it is for you. So for me, I think it's really having a goal, really being able to nail down what I'm trying to accomplish. And for, retirement or for health, a lot of these things go hand in hand, but I think that that's critically important in this day and age in order to stay focused, because everything around you is trying to take your focus away from you.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, whether true or not, I think we've talked about this also, is sort of this theory of your 5 closest friends. We talk about building community, having like-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy when you're surrounded by people that may not focus on exercise, may not focus on healthy eating or taking care of themselves, and including, debt. Suddenly, everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is buying luxurious cars, things that they can't afford that they don't really need.
Exactly.
How do you break the mold? And I think for us, as we've talked about, we have very close friends. Some of them push us very hard. Some of us are saying, hey, I want to retire quick. How do I get there? And it's sort of inspirational. Whereas you have others that, like you said, can maybe be a little bit more complacent. They're happy and content with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But is that the life that you want? Is that the direction and the path that you want to take?
Yeah, that's a question that you have to answer for yourself. It's
Absolutely.
It's okay to be comfortable.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the goal, right?
Yeah. But is it comfortable now? Is it comfortable later? I think we both like to live life without regrets. We do the best we can and make decisions, and they're going to be tough decisions. You will likely have to sacrifice at one way or another. And we do the best we can to just, make the best decisions we can.
Yep. It's just wild to think about even 10, 20 years ago where you were and where you are today.
Mindset was completely different.
Totally different. And where we will be in 20 years and how our mindsets will be different then. And these are all things that we have to read and learn about. And, maybe it's even a good thing to write down to see how things change. But, having your retirement goal, having that conversation with your spouse, getting aligned, learning about what things work for you. These are all important things, and it's interesting to talk about it and learn as you get older, as you're moving through your life, to figure out some of these questions. Looking back, as I have said all that, I feel like I already kind of went back and kind of jump into our how did we get here segment. I kind of already did that. But I guess if we move over to our rabbit hole segment, what's been on your mind, Twiggles?
There's a lot of things. Every day something pops up, but something of going into my ADHD purchases, something that I've had in the living room for a while is I bought a steering wheel. I'm a big fan. A few of my friends are big into the Forza Horizon driving games. And, well, I wanted to practice at home. The kids also enjoy go-karting. What great idea. And after I bought it, kind of sat there in the living room. Even bought a stand for it. And, there's, Forza Horizon 6 is coming out and came out. And trying to figure out how to get it to work, it's not so plug and play is what I've learned. So doing a bunch of research, talking to friends, trying to figure out how to get it to work has really kind of taken up some of my time. How about yourself? What kind of rabbit hole did you find yourself jumping into?
I don't even know how it started. I'm a fan of chess. I like chess. I'll play I think it's Light Chess or Light Chess. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that or chess.com. And I generally follow it occasionally. And I guess I got gotten, as they would say, I got. There was an ad for this thing called Chess Up. And it's basically it's like a physical digital chessboard. And you can play chess. But it like lights up and stuff. It teaches you all the moves. You can connect it to your like online account and play the robots online. It syncs with chess.com or Lichess. You can play other people who have the chessboard remotely. It'll show you their move and you can move your piece on your table. And one of the reasons why I kind of want it is because it's a really good tool to introduce to my kids. I want to play chess with them. And, it'll help me teach them. We can play together. One of the things that they say is like, if you want your kids to do something, you need to be the role model and do it yourself.
I agree with you.
So I'm going to use all of my strategies to figure out how I can get this chess up board as a gift for Father's Day or something. Is a giant hint to my wife.
What you can't see is how hard I'm smiling because, as you mentioned, I didn't know what it was, but I think I've seen this Shark Tank episode. I too was very interested and had the same compelling thought pattern of trying to teach my kids, but I did not get got. My alternative, which is significantly cheaper, hint hint, there are other options. So I use chesskid.com. We sign up for it. It is digital. Yes, you don't have something tangible. We do have chess sets. We do have, we can get a timer and all sorts of things. So is it worth the money?
Absolutely.
You tend to be that of the grandiose. I personally could not justify the price tag because there are many things. There's smart things everywhere. We've talked about even baby products. Is it really necessary? You could also just go through and play chess together.
It's all about like
optimizing
justifying the purchase. It's all about bonding with your kids. You can't put a price tag on it.
Oh, that is a slippery slope, my friend. I cannot. I agree with you, but also I could already hear from your wife that and our friend group. I wish you luck, my friend.
Yeah, we'll see about it. It's a cool thing. It's definitely a cool tool.
It is.
I would love to get it, but yeah, it is a little pricey.
I would start with just a basic chess set because at a minimum,
that's the problem because it has lights, man. When your kids are like 4, they want the lights. They don't want a chess piece. They're gonna throw the chess piece at me.
I get it. That is an expensive cost for some lights.
That is true.
And I am usually very supportive of getting lights. That brings me joy. Hey, but yes.
Steering wheel racing can get exorbitantly expensive too.
That
is a whole rabbit hole you can go down.
That is fair. I take that. However, I have drawn. Well, I drew the line. I knew that and this is actually something not to justify. I'm trying to justify myself, but I spent years, deciding that I didn't want it, and it happened to be on sale. It was on super sale, and I said, "Hey, I'd love to have it." Let the kids kind of play, and they were starting to get old enough to start going go-karting, which was fun.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great buy, and it was something I always wanted. And
you got. You got.
I sort of got. It is true, especially when I tried to plug it in and I'm like, I can't drive in the game. This is terrible. This is a horrible experience. Not going to lie, it crossed my mind. I said, man, I should just sell this to one of my friends who probably wants it and make some money back. But I realize it is probably a configuration issue and I need to just get it better and then I'll be able to use it more.
You bought it so long ago that a new Forza game came out that
It's
you
true.
could use it for.
I was
You've gone
planning
full
ahead,
circle.
okay? I was planning ahead. That was big brain.
Well, just to wrap up, we talked a lot about retirement and planning. And one of the things that we like to do is to also have an actionable step for, our listeners. And if it's something that you can do, we challenge you to look at your budget. If you don't have one, make one.
Just
and if
understand
you don't,
and
if you
start.
have one,
See where your money's going.
and if you have one, try to automate, putting some money away. Because it's really easy to spend $50 a month on DoorDash. You could be putting half of that into a retirement account and still go out, instead of DoorDash, pick up your order. Spend 25 on the order and 25 on your retirement. Get best of the both worlds. But
absolutely. Great topic.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that we covered a different part of, but there's a lot more to talk about. But yeah, I appreciate talking with you about this topic, Twiggles.
Yeah, it was a great time. We'll talk soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.